Little heads up, Chris. Little heads up. I'm playing it risky today. My mic has an hour and 13 minutes on it. That's what's left.
Shit. Well, why tell me about this risk at the beginning?
Just...
Why not?
Mate,
why not let me know before you hit record?
I live on the edge.
Jeez.
I live on the edge of reason. I live on the edge of risk.
There's living on the edge, and then there's just utter madness, Dan.
This podcast better be short and to the point. Might be a bit much to ask of us, but if it isn't, the ending's just going to be lost. And you know what would be really a terrible thing to do, Chris? Would be to open by talking about it so much. I wasted several precious minutes.
Well, this is my concern, Dan. Roll the titles. Do we do that on this podcast?
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to calculate. Yeah. I'll come on with the proper thing now.
Roll up the title. Roll the titles then. Roll the goddamn titles, Dan.
I've rolled them. I'm about to say hello. Don't you stop yelling at me. Every time I take a breath to do the intro, you yell at me to roll the titles. Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender. I am Dan and as always joined by the Late Airbender himself, Chris Billingham. This week we're taking a look at Lake Laogai. But before that, Chris, why are you yelling at me so much? It's early in the morning.
You just got to roll the titles, Dan.
I rolled the titles. Look, you know what's funny is, the first time we did that joke, you yelled at me for putting a sentence in the middle so you knew I was pausing. Do you remember doing that? So you went, roll the titles. I went, okay, we'll leave a beat for the title. And you're like, no, Dan, just go into it. Just go into it. Don't tell me you're leaving a beat. I don't need to know that. Now I leave a beat and I'm getting yelled at for not rolling the titles. You can't hear the titles, Chris. That happens in editing.
Look, I just said, you're the one worried about time. Roll the damn titles.
I was rolling them. I was just taking a minute to take a
You're getting cocky. You think, we've got rid of the... in fact, we've got a list of questions today.
We do have a list of questions today, yes, we do.
Right. Get on with the episode.
Right, welcome to this Avatar podcast, apparently, sometimes when we get to it. This week we're looking at Lake Laogai, which is the episode in which the gang, up their search for Appa, they resort to posters and other such means that lead to Longfeng sort of deciding he has to sort of do something about it. What he chooses to do. It's both a terrible and a not terrible plan at once. Like, the basic premise of it is that he's going to send Jet in, they've brainwashed, to basically convince them to take them on a little sort of theatrical experience, an interactive theatre experience where they go into this barn and this guy's pretending that he's been looking after Appa for weeks and they've just moved him, and they've moved him far away from the Earth Kingdom to sort of coax Aang and the gang to leave, essentially. Backfires quite heavily when Sokka inexplicably discovers that Jet's been brainwashed. And the gang realise that Longfeng must have Appa. Again, there's a lot of leaps of logic, but it's fine. Moves the plot forward. They all head off to Lake Laogai, where there's a whole sequence of events that involves Zuko being confronted with the choice about what he wants and what destiny has been thrust upon him. In the end, choosing to free Appa. Yeah, and that kind of leads us into the end of the episode where the Daily are sort of scattered, but not necessarily defeated, but the gang have got Appa back. Presumably their mission now returning to the original purpose of being in Ba Sing Se, which is to let the Earth King know about the Day of Black Sun. So, yeah, that's kind of where we leave things off. Obviously, a few details missed out there, particularly surrounding Jet's fate. So, yeah, let's chat Lake Laogai. Chris, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. Good episode. A lot happened.
Yes.
A lot of emotional character stuff in all sides. Like you say, a few leaps of logic. This is one of those episodes that you almost go, this could really do with being like 30 minutes, 40 minutes long. Then you maybe could do the Jet stuff in a more naturalistic way, but maybe it doesn't need to be. It was fine. I really liked it. Triumphant return of Appa at the end. Some great stuff with Zuko. Big fan, Dan.
Yeah, I like this one too. I think you're right about it. Like, it could 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes might have allowed them to smooth out some of the leaps of logic. Particularly, I don't think I'll ever get over it. It's the scene. So we reveal this week that Toph can sort of tell if someone's lying or not. Basically, she can sense their heartbeat and their breathing, and when people lie, that shifts. So she feels that, and can sort of tell. But it's like Smellaby's telling the truth. But so is Jet. Jet must be brainwashed then. Sorry, Sokka. I mean, you're right, but like, how? Like, you've never... It's not like these guys are coming across brainwashing every day. That is such a leap in logic I can't even express. Like, how quickly Sokka comes to that conclusion is remarkable. And yeah, I just, every time I watch this episode, I'm forced to sort of reckon with the logic of that and how that comes to be.
Well, especially because, like, you had Jodie earlier in the episode, and it's not like, unless I'm remembering it wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not, and I watched it this morning, it's not like when she goes away, they go, maybe she's been brainwashed. It's not like we have a moment where the brainwashed seed is planted in their heads.
Right. Yeah, that's why it feels like such a leap.
Because thinking about it, you really could have done it with that Jodie thing, couldn't you?
Yeah, it wouldn't take long, would it? I'm Judy. Okay, you're acting
Judy.
quite weird, Judy. You okay? I've been fine. She walks out. Okay, maybe she's had her brain messed with? Yeah, I can see she's acted as if nothing happened, despite the fact they replaced her about 2 weeks ago. Cool. Some sort of acknowledgement that something was going on. You're right, that's exactly how they do it.
Or you start to embed, like, because they do some really cool stuff with Jet fighting the brainwashing and ultimately snapping out of it at the end.
Right.
Have him, they're walking and maybe he reaches out and he grabs Katara's hand.
Yeah.
And then he lets go of it and she's like, what's going on with you? And he's like, oh, nothing. Like, you have him fighting him inside. There's a voice rallying against it. And then you kind of, you could do some cool stuff with their, you give them another moment. So, it adds more power at the end when she's upset about, the position he ends up in, which obviously we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you could have, we've just in, 2 minutes, not saying we're better, obviously, we're very clearly not. But, like, we've come up with 2 ideas for embedding that a little bit. But it's very much, I don't think it's even... it's not a nitpick because it's quite a big thing, but it's not a big thing that ruins the episode.
No, it's noticeable, it's jarring, and it is fixable with a bit more time. But it's not the end of the world, is it?
No.
It's the episode sort of functions regardless. Like, it works quite well.
It's not even particularly frustrating. Do you know what I mean?
No. I should note, because listeners might be able to hear, if you can't, then, wasted breath here, but just in case, the lawnmower man is literally back, and he's mowing out there. This is, for those who are just listening to this, there was an episode, I think season 1, of Analysing Avatar, where there was a guy that kept passing my bloody window with a lawnmower, and it was really loud, and I was quite frustrated by it. All I can hear right now is, and then he gets to the end of like a row and it turns off for a second. I think, oh, he's done. I guess he isn't. So I don't know if you guys can hear it or not, but I just wanted to apologise. This is the only time we can record.
I can't, which is often a good. I can't, which is often a good gauge. It's not an exact science, but often if the other person can't hear it, the audience don't either.
Yeah, through the headphones. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so yeah, hopefully you guys can't hear it, but if you can, I do apologise for the irritation of the slight humming in the background of the grinding, however you want to describe that sound. Anyway, so go on, sir.
I was going to say, let's go to the big one. One of the big ones. Jet.
Yes.
Because I'm sort of fascinated by Because it very much, that he's lying and the looks on the faces of the tribe, like, they were giving a definite dude's gonna die vibe.
Right.
And I hope he doesn't, because if he is going to die, kill him on screen. Like, have him die on screen. I mean, because if he doesn't, but then he is dead, it will feel like they didn't have the balls to kill him on screen. Or they felt that they had to soften it because it's a kids' show. So I thought it was incredibly powerful, incredibly dramatic. But if we'd bump into his gang in a couple of episodes' time and they're like, yeah, he died, I'll be like, he could have died on screen then. I don't think he's dead for that reason. I think the writers of this are braver than that. But yeah, I thought all of that stuff was incredibly well done and heartbreaking. Again, maybe enhanced further if, him and Katara had a moment. But yeah,
it's interesting because I don't know how to. This is the episode to talk about this, but at the same time, there's a part of me that wants you to sort of figure it out the way everyone else did. But basically, people may yell at me in the comments, but yeah, Jet died, and
oh shit, so he did die,
and it's never really mentioned again, with one exception.
Wow.
The reason it played out the way it played out, I think, my understanding, is they wanted to do it and Nickelodeon pushed back.
Wow.
Nickelodeon, it wasn't that the writers weren't brave enough. They wanted to do it and do it clearly. But the writers were not permitted to do it on screen. So their get around for that was the Toph line. When he says, I'll be fine, and Toph says, he's lying. That is supposed to be your confirmation of what happened with Jet. The reason that I'm telling you this, instead of just letting you figure it out next time we come across his gang, is quite simply because this is the episode we need to have that discussion, because it's part of this episode. But also, there's no moment coming that you're going to get that, you know what I mean? It doesn't come up, so there's no other appropriate time for us to discuss it. So if anyone's mad at me for basically confirming Jet's fate here, rather than letting string Chris along for a bit, I would combat that with, when else are we gonna have this conversation?
Because it feels like you wouldn't do it if there was a moment where they bump into the gang and they go, did Jet survive? And they go, no, and they all look to the floor and have a moment's silence. But it sounds like we don't get that moment.
Nope.
The fact that you're having to tell me, I think, is inherently part of the problem. Then, like, yes. And maybe I'm. Look, it is. It's a science fiction action adventure show. I'm sorry if it's not. It's too ambiguous. And like I said in my thing, and like you've just said, it feels ambiguous because they got kicked back and couldn't do it.
Right.
But that's such a shame, because the he's lying is powerful, but fundamentally they walk away from him and he is alive, and people are saying they're going to do all they can to help him. In most science fiction adventure shows, that would mean the character isn't dead and makes a triumphant return. And like I say, I think the death is powerful, but really powerful and emotive, and even the lying stuff is. But the notion that we don't get, we don't get reaction. They're not mourning at the beginning of the next episode is really sad. This is the most major death we've had so far, isn't it? I would argue. So, yeah, that sucks that we don't get that, and that they couldn't, because watching it, it felt like they were trying. It felt like a network had gone, it's a kid show, you can't do this. It felt like it was trying to do both. Whereas it felt like the scene was fighting for him to die. Even still, if he had died, I would argue that the triumph of Appa returning is strange, and not getting a mourning scene, not dealing with the death, is strange. Like, they literally go from him dying to, hey, Appa's back, and they hug on Appa at the end.
Well,
they all rally. rally round Katara.
I
but...
guess the explanation is the gang don't 100% know he's dead. But then you have to, but then you have to go, well, wait a second. If the gang don't know he's dead, why don't they have questions in future about his presence? Like it's a really weird line they're having to tote here, and I feel for the writing team because it's rough. Like there's nothing they can really do about it. Especially back then. Like again, to put it in context, now it's like you just fight for it and you put it in, you stick it out. If Rebecca Sugar can get her wedding, you can get a death. Like that doesn't seem like it would be as big of a hurdle to climb, to leap. So let's get on this. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. We'll fight for it. It's worth it. The episode would be vastly improved. The show would be vastly improved to commit to this and not do it that way, in this sort of half measure. But the problem is, in a 2005 or whatever this season would have been out world, that just these shows were at the mercy of their networks. There wasn't fighting because shows weren't doing this kind of stuff. Kids shows on Nickelodeon at the time weren't killing characters. And while now it feels like, these shows have matured to the point where they can get away with stuff like that. In the context of when this show was written and made, they would have very much been at the mercy of a network pushing back, and a network with no precedent for it either. Once you do it, I guess, and you see that parents don't lose their minds, that's a different matter. But yeah, frustrating is how I would describe it, if I'm honest.
And that is something felt by the fandom as a whole.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are frustrated with the ambiguity in question there. And it's a shame because it's a really good episode marred by this really strange choice. And if, again, the character returned at a later time, you'd just go, well, they left it ambiguous to leave him alive. They wanted a dramatic moment, didn't he? But they also committed to their original plan, which is, I think if Nickelodeon had pushed back and I wasn't able to do the death the way I wanted, as a writer, I think my next thought would be, okay, then we just don't kill him. Because if we're not going to do it properly, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You would have him have a dramatic return 10 episodes from now, whenever, in a key moment, have him come and save the day.
Yeah,
but we're deprived
completely.
of that. I feel like I really am having to shout over the lawnmower. This is really bad. You can hear this now, right, Chris? It's really loud.
I can hear the lawnmower now. Yeah.
Fucking hell, the timing. 1 second.
What's he gonna do? I mean, this isn't going to help the 1 hour 13-minute time frame we've got, is it? Suddenly there's a lot of jeopardy.
I can't even see the dude. I have no idea where he is. It was ridiculous. He literally, we agreed to record at 9, and he literally started mowing the lawn at 9, like bang on.
Well, we'll keep going. When he gets closer, see if you can see how long he's going to be, which is what I assume you were going to do.
That's terrible. Sorry, guys.
I can't hear it at the moment. So yeah, I completely agree. Like it's just there's no satisfaction because it is so half measures, and I don't blame them. I don't blame the creatives. It's very clear what they wanted to do. The scene aches for it. I think that would have been a struggle with the Appa joy afterwards. I think that would have been a bit jarring.
Right.
But it would have been better, and it is such a shame. I don't blame them, but it does affect that scene and that moment that is so powerful. Even like, is he close to that now for you to ask?
No, I can't even see him.
I think you're lying. I think you're having a shave. You've just got a razor and you're having a shave. Or even maybe he's
around the side of the building. Like I literally I can't physically see him. So there's nothing I could. There's literally until he comes round. I can't even see him to clock
enough.
eyes. So yeah, we just got the deal.
Well,
The answer
we're
to
trying,
so
mate.
just to clarify, the answer to all of my thoughts and questions on this episode from now on will be.
I'll try and talk when it's there. Yeah, I maybe even like there's some sort of they establish somehow that there's some sort of if the guys fucking know, shoot a firework, well not that, but like he has gone. Maybe some sort of way in which once they're on Appa, there could be a symbol. Maybe the gang come onto the beach carrying him or something. Just something to go to confirm on screen. Yes, he has passed away.
But that's the thing is they weren't allowed to do that. That was the whole thing.
That's crazy.
That's what they had. That's what they got pushback
because
on, was confirming.
The moment would have been so emotive, and we'd be sat here talking about how brave and incredible it was that in 2005 a show did this.
Right. Correct.
Or just have it more overt next time they see the gang. Have that moment. Have that mourning moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
So what happened then? The creators had to come out and be like, "Oh, by the way, he is dead."
I guess so. I don't remember exactly how it got cleared up in the end. I could try and Google it. Bear with me. Give it a googe, as they'd say on the Weekly Planet.
That's such a shame, but a powerful moment, a great moment, and it is still brave. What they wanted to do is still incredibly emotive, and I don't dislike. I just want I take it exactly as it is, but with that moment or with confirmation afterwards, because the he's lying is very powerful, very powerful.
I thought I had an interview or something where they talked about it, but no, it doesn't seem that way.
No, fine, fair enough.
So yeah,
Appa's return. What did you think?
Yeah, sorry, my Googling got me too distracted for a podcast. I was desperate to find the answer, but I couldn't find I wanted a quote from one of the guys. I should have really found one before we started, but I'm sure they've talked about it. Maybe I'll take another look at a later point and I'll bring it back up. But yeah, so I think you're right. It's tricky because it does affect Appa's return then, because you want the joy of that moment, but obviously Jet's just sort of maybe potentially died. I guess in a weird way it works out in the episode's favour, because even though Jet dies, because the gang kind of don't know that for sure, it allows you to have that moment with Appa, which I guess...
Yeah, I do think that moment is full on triumph, and I think it would have suffered if it had been the original death.
Right.
It's kind of, I keep thinking about how, spoilers, well, it didn't happen, but in Infinity War, Professor Hulk was meant to bust out of the Hulk Buster in the end of Infinity War, but they thought it was too much of a moment of triumph to have when the whole thing is winding down to tragedy. So they couldn't break that momentum of loss with a moment of tragedy, and it would be like that here, but sort of reverse.
I still disagree with that logic.
I think we may have discussed that on here before, actually, haven't we? So we won't repeat the discussion. But yeah, that was the logic they used.
Yeah, I disagree with them.
But Appa actually returning is just amazing, because I think it's because not only do you feel so many things at once because of the way the writing's been done so cleverly. You feel Aang and Appa reuniting. You feel, because of the last episode, Appa finding his family, but you also in that moment go, Zuko, let him go. Like, you realise in that moment something as an audience member that the characters aren't even aware of, which is Zuko made the right decision.
Right. Well, that's the big thing about this episode is Zuko's whole arc in this episode is fantastic. It's the thing that Iroh was trying to protect Zuko from last week, by not telling him about the Appa sighting. Zuko found out about it by his own means this week because Aang peppered the city in, the Appa posters. Also, I've got to ask the question: how did Zuko know where to find Appa?
That bloke. I assume that bloke told him. That bloke worked for those shady peeps,
right,
and directed him.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So Yeah. That does track. So I think what's clever about the way they do this is you have a situation where you think at any moment Zuko could essentially return to his old ways. You have the same concerns Iroh does. So when Zuko dons the blue spirit outfit again and heads out there into the world, you're like, is this a relapse? Is this Zuko going to turn to his old ways? Will he ever learn? Like, what? Come on, like, you need to make a choice here. And then to put him in a position where he goes to. I mean, I guess his is his plan initially to go get Appa to lure the Avatar to him. That his plan initially. It's a bit unclear, isn't it? What he's actually doing to start with. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think it's it's like you just said. It's what Iroh says to him. He's not thinking clearly. So
right.
it's not clear because he's not thought it through.
Right. Yeah, because Iroh literally says to him, doesn't he? Like, do you even have a plan? What do you do when you get to this point? Yeah, that's right. Because he sort of brings back up the North Pole. It's like it's the same thing. You ran into the Northern Water Tribe. You got Aang, and then it's like, well, then what do you do? What next? It's so fucking loud. I can't even think straight.
But I think that's the beauty of it, because you do. I don't think even as an audience member, until Iroh says it, you're just like, oh shit, what is his plan? Like, hop on Appa, and Appa's just gonna be like, yeah, all right, I'll go with you.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make any sense. So it's cool because I mean that whole speech that Iroh gives is amazing. It's about he's talking about it's his destiny, and Iroh's sort of saying like, well, wait a minute, is this your destiny, or is that a destiny you've had thrust upon you? And then he ends with that brilliant, like, it's a big speech, it's a really great speech, and it ends with that, who are you and what do you want? Which is just an incredible way to sort of lay it out. And the fact that Iroh, like, was able to follow him as well, I think is another sign of Iroh's badassery. Like, Iroh was just there.
Yeah, I love how, like, they've done in a way, Iroh is one of the best written characters in the show.
Right.
Because you don't at any point go, that doesn't seem feasible, because they've literally set up a world where you go, oh yeah, Iroh's pretty kick-ass. like he could just do it. Like, you just believe it, like, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's really well done. So yeah, I think the Iroh Zuko stuff in this episode is incredible. And the way they pace it as well, which is kind of perfect. Which is like the initial, he finds the thing, he starts that journey, he gets there, they have that huge conversation, and then they cut away from it, and we don't find out the cleverness, the simple choice to just not show us him making the decision, but actually to reveal at the end that it was Zuko that freed Appa, after we'd already had Appa's heroic return, where he sort of shows up and chucks Longfeng across the river. Does some skipping stones with Longfeng.
That's the thing. It's not even that he just left him. Even just leaving him for the gang would be amazing. But he freed him, which does suggest that there was a way that he could have taken him. But, whatever. So, yeah, I don't quite understand the logic of how they freed him, but then themselves didn't, like, get out until they kind of walked out the tunnel later.
Right, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because they're in the room with Appa. We don't see what then happens. Appa is outside and joins the fray as the battle commences with Longfeng and the Dai Li. Then Iroh and Zuko come out of the thing, but we'd already had Aang and the gang go to where Appa was being held and find it empty, and not just empty of Appa, but empty of Iroh and Zuko.
But isn't there?
So did Iroh and Zuko free Appa, then go for a cup of tea at the Lake Laogai canteen? Just with all of the Dai Li agents, just like in the canteen having lunch.
I'm just trying to find it now. I think there is a shot. It goes up when they're in there, and there's a hole in the ceiling. So it could be that Appa went out the ceiling.
Right.
And it's reasonable to assume that setting him free or not, Appa's probably not going to be at a stage where he lets them ride him. So I've just got it here.
It's still a bit odd though that Aang and the gang got outside. I suppose they had Toph to help them find their way out.
Yeah, you'd think. Well, I suppose they won't all. Well, we're back to logics of Aang's stick thing. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe they don't. Maybe the shot above is somewhere else. No, not at least in that moment where they break in and see that he's gone. There's no indication that the roof is buggered or anything. Oh, I suppose there's light coming down, which would maybe suggest that there's a hole in the ceiling.
Well, there you go. We'll work under that logic. We'll fansplain it away. There's a hole. There's a hole or gap of some sort in the ceiling. When he frees Appa, Appa flies up out of it into the air and is out. And they have to go the long way around to get out, passing the canteen on the way. Stop for a cup of tea. Iroh judges their canteen tea as not being sufficient. And even
speaking of tea, it does make you. It is fascinating to think. It's sort of right. So the shot where they're sort of stood looking at Appa, wondering what to do. It zooms out, and it doesn't zoom out completely, but it zooms out into like a square hole in the ceiling. So maybe Appa got out through that.
There you go.
It does make you go because they've not set up a world where I believe Zuko's gonna be like, all right, well I guess we're doing this tea shop thing then. Cool. So I'm fascinated to see where he goes next. I mean,
right, yeah, because we haven't really talked about that. So in this episode, they set up that their new identities, their new lives. It's going quite well for them in the sense of Zuko and Iroh have been offered this opportunity to do a tea shop. In the upper ring, which is where all the rich people live, because word has gotten around that he's the best tea maker in the city, and it's like good things are happening for Lee and Mushi, but Zuko gets put on this path to start with by sort of not rejecting it, but like not. That's what his uncle wants. It's not necessarily what he wants for himself.
He says that things are going well for his uncle, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going well for him.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like he doesn't want to serve tea. He wants to fulfill his destiny, but I don't think he knows what he wants beyond that. So yeah, it's quite an interesting situation they've sort of set up here because you're right. It's hard to imagine Zuko just being content serving tea. But also, what else can he do? Yeah, anything else he chooses to do is going to be putting him on a potentially dark path again.
Unless it's the other. I mean, he's just made a correct, good decision for the sake of for Aang and for the gang. Like, whatever way you cut that, he's the notion of him it's always been indicated in the show that the ultimate big bad is the Fire Lord. So if it's not Zuko, you've got the ability. It's this seems to be the beginnings of a redemption arc. So and I would be fascinated by that. I think that notion of do we reach a point where he's almost part of the gang, but he never really feel like part of the gang? Can they get over their history? Fucking someone's got to teach Aang firebending. Right. There's not been many other candidates. So this notion of can they ever get past, that notion of in a different life we would have been friends. It's hard to not. This show seems way too clever to reverse what they're doing now with Zuko, which is him gradually doing more and more good things. The gang are fighting. The enemy at the moment for the gang is his sister, who is also Zuko's enemy. So, not to do 2 episodes of theorizing, but I just think the show is clever enough to see, and the creators are clever enough to see what, in my mind at least, and if they've got a better idea, I'll happily take it, explore if he's going to kind of go to the side of good, how on earth does that look, and what does that lead to? But they've set all the pieces for that. You know, they share the same enemy. He's done good things. Again, logically, we're approaching series 3, and that needs to be about him learning firebending. I would love it if Zuko's the one teaching him, and I wouldn't love it if we just reversed it and he's the bad guy again.
Right.
But yeah, so I think there is a route of what you do with him, without a doubt. Maybe the sister like kills Iroh. Well, she's not going to kill Iroh because we clearly can't have deaths in this show. But you know what I mean.
That's
tried
the thing,
once
isn't
before.
it? Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because you know, by not committing here, it sort of does make does give the show a certain amount of lost attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially when you've now got all these other characters who are Jet is the biggest death they've had, but he's not Iroh. Do you know what I mean? Right. He's not Katara. He's not any of those characters.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Other stuff that we should probably chat about that just before we move on. I love that they've just started again. I was like, they'd stopped. They haven't. They've come back. Just other stuff to talk about. Sokka's bad art at the beginning of the episode.
That was amazing.
It's so funny. Like, the arrow's supposed to be on his head. That is his head. That is his head. And then one of those are his horns. It's amazing. But also the blind jokes. Dear Lord. Toph going, I think it looks great, Sokka. He's like, thank you. I worked really. Oh, why do you do that?
Yeah.
That's an amazing moment.
Potentially, not to Marvel compare it again, but one of the funniest moments was also the Hulk smash moment, or the puny god moment, where the dude goes to attack Appa, and Appa just slings him in the water.
Yeah, amazing. Appa just throwing Long Feng out, just skipping stones Long Feng out into the water. Love it. I also loved when they're putting the posters up. And Soph's like, what, you don't think I can put a poster up? And she slaps a poster onto the wall, and it's like facing in, so it's the back of it that's going. She goes, it's upside down, isn't it? Which isn't even what she got wrong. She's like, I'll go with Sokka. It's just an amazing moment. Yeah, Judy Training Center, creepy as fuck. Right?
Yeah, that was creepy. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to say about it, but it's upsetting. I don't like it.
Yeah, it was very much so.
So yeah, for those who don't remember, they just pass a room where they're all just being like trained to be Judies, and that was super freaky. I like that they tried to. I thought it was kind of smart for Long Feng to try and bring back the original Judy, thinking that maybe she has a bit more of the Avatar's trust. But kind of shooting himself in the foot a little bit, but because by replacing Judy with another Judy at an earlier point, they kind of evaporated any trust that they'd ever have in Judy. So he kind of shot himself in the foot by replacing her originally, you know? Although I think it's a good idea. I like that he's thinking. I think I understand his logic of, well, I'll bring Judy back because they know her. They might trust her a bit more than this second Judy. But obviously he didn't think it through to its logical conclusion, which is, if you've already replaced her once, they're going to struggle to trust any Judy at this stage. I also liked her having that conversation with Long Feng where she has spotted that and says, look, they're not going to trust me now. There's nothing I can do. I thought that was pretty cool. Do we need to talk anything about Toph's new power to detect lying, and whether that's something that maybe could have been handy in the past or not? It's a pretty big power to give someone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those. Will it be used again? Why hasn't it been used before? Is it only relevant for this episode, so it's in this episode stuff? I think it. Yeah, if it never comes up again, I'll feel a bit cheated, I guess. But Toph in general, I found this episode, like, there was a moment when I realised that, like, a lot of fights moving forward have to do that thing of, like, working out how they get Toph out the way. because she's so powerful.
Right.
Like, she's so powerful that it's like, oh, and like she has to get knocked out or taken down early on. So like it's almost funny when you see Toph doing all these incredible things with earthbending, and then you cut to Katara and Sokka, who are like batting away rocks with sticks, and you kind of go, those aren't the same things.
No.
Like, that's very different skill sets we're talking about here.
Toph is the lapis lazuli of the group, isn't she? Where like she's just so powerful. It's like, are we just gonna make her live on the moon for a bit, just because otherwise,
yeah, exactly.
she could solve a lot of these problems.
Yes, I did also have an issue with the lie detector stuff. Well, it depends whether it becomes a thing. I mean, it was very specific. They were specifically lent against rocks and stuff every time it was used. So it's not like, I don't think the implication is she could do it if someone was just standing up based on the vibrations of their feet. I sort of viewed it as the vibrations of their pulse and stuff as they hit the rock, because they were either pressed up against it or led down on it. So yeah, there's probably a fan-splaining thing you could do if you wanted, but it's arguably loose.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you know, you either kind of have to make use of that again in the future, or like, because it is a good device in a lot of ways, isn't it? Because you often get these situations in shows like this where there are sort of like good guys, bad guys, and a lot of people in between, where you don't know 100% who to trust, right? Like having a character that can cut through those questions when they crop up. Like, this episode would have been so much longer if they hadn't known that they could trust Jet straight away. You'd have a hard time convincing me that they'd trust Jet at all. But having Toph immediately just cut through that and go, no, he's telling the truth. I don't know this guy, but he's telling the truth. You know, that actually was like a really good device in terms of getting the plot going. Because I didn't need an hour of, well, not an hour, but like I didn't need 20 minutes of, do we trust Jet again? You know, move the plot on, and that's in a weird way. Like, you know, assuming they make use of it again in future, like there's a part of me that just goes, fine. If it's gonna cut through some of that bullshit, great. Especially
when it happened quite a while ago. Like, I literally had a moment of, why is she mad at Jet? Like, and then it's like, oh, who cares? It's not relevant. She is. That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Well, you know, the last time they saw him, he betrayed them quite heavily.
No, I remembered.
Yeah. I thought the other big thing we learned this episode that's a big. I mean, it doesn't change anything, but we get a flash of the Fire Nation, destroying his hometown and murdering his parents, and we have the slight reveal. I mean, it's not a huge. Again, it doesn't really change anything, but the Rough Rhinos appear to have been the group that did it. For those who don't remember, the Rough Rhinos are the group that showed up in the Avatar Day episode. They're the Fire Nation's weapons specialists. One of them throws bombs, one of them wields a sword, one of them does arrows, I think. They attacked that town in Avatar Day. They also were the ones who captured Iroh earlier in the season and were taking him to Ba Sing Se when he was all sort of shackled up. And so, I mean, it doesn't really, again, it doesn't change anything at all to know it's them specifically. It doesn't give anyone a goal to like get revenge or whatever, but it was just a really interesting detail because, as I've said before, I like that there's a consistency to this world in that there are certain battalions of, you know, Fire Nation troops we've bumped into a couple of times. Like there were those Arrow guys from the first seasons, like those, you know, they were like expert marksmen or whatever, and they showed up a couple times. You know, so I don't know. It's like it's just, it gives the world a bit more depth. Like that, it's the same people that have shown up a couple times.
Yes, I think so. I think that's exactly key. It gives it more depth,
right? But without giving it, like,
always great.
Because I guess in a world where Jet doesn't end the way Jet ends in this episode, there's a world where if Jet survived and we learned that information, you'd be going, well, are we going to get to see Jet get revenge on the Rough Rhinos at some point? But the way they play it, it's pretty low key. You don't really feel the need for that. It's more just like, oh, that happens to be who it was, but his issue is still with the Fire Nation on the whole. You know, so it's played quite well and quite subtly. I didn't. It was years till I even realized it was the Rough Rhinos in that flash because it all comes by so quick. Excuse me. I did notice in the flashbacks, though. You know, especially in the moment. So for those who don't remember the episode, he gets the initial flash of his past when they're talking to him and the thing. But then there's a moment when Long Feng turns Jet on Aang with like a keyword, like, you know, I can't remember what he says, something about Lake Laogai. And Jet starts attacking Aang because he's fully mind controlled. But then he has this like moment of flashing memories. But almost all of the memories, except like one or two, are stuff that's been already animated and exists in the show. I was like,
yeah, and I found in general there was in his flashbacks and in the whole "is he your boyfriend? You're lying" thing. I'm like, obviously, Katara and Jet were close, and like clearly there was a bit of infatuation with each other, but I think they're over. Do you know what I mean? Like, the show is trying to make it a little more than it was, which is weird because if you're not then going to really explore what his death means to her in the way that they have what Thingamajig's death has meant to Sokka, then don't do it. Like, why have you sort of made that more of a thing?
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed.
For both characters. It feels like you're trying to add weight to the death, but if you're not then going to explore that weight, don't add weight.
Don't waste our time.
Like, how much more impactful would it have been? And it would have meant animating stuff, but if all those flashbacks were about his gang,
right,
and then he dies in the arms of his gang,
yeah,
I think that would have been more impactful than something,
but more expensive.
Yeah, but you know that's what you do when Nickelodeon say you can't kill a guy. You go, all right, well, give us more money to animate some of this shit.
Yeah, would agree.
Yeah.
Would agree.
Obviously, that's not how it goes. I'm aware of that. All right, then, well, give us more money for this. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. So, the last little quick note, I just wanted to give them a bit of a compliment before we move on to the trivia very quickly. The edit, when Jet opens the door and we cut to Appa and light hitting him from a door being opened, but then it's Zuko and he says, we expecting someone else, is genius. One of the best edits this show has ever done. It's so seamless that it totally sells you on the shock of that moment. When it is Zuko, you're genuinely surprised. Because they really, really cleverly edit it together to make it look like... Because Jet's just said, I think he might be in this big room at the end here. Yeah, just brilliantly done. I always love that moment, and I wanted to give it some props. Shall we...
It's a great moment.
Let's
triv it up!
It's nice to be interrupted by Chris yelling, let's triv it up, rather than
Mate, I'm conscious of time. We've only got 20 minutes and we've got a question. Let's do it.
Okay, there's not much trivia this week, thankfully. So Lake Laogai, this episode, won a Primetime Emmy Award for individual achievement, whatever that means. The Emmy Awards have some weird award names, but it won an Emmy. That's nice. The show deserves an Emmy. It's a good show. This is a good episode. Not perfect, as we've hit a couple of little issues, but like nothing I would say that really ultimately detracts from the overall enjoyment of what is otherwise quite a good episode. So the term Laogai is an abbreviation of Laodong Gyaizo, I believe, which is what it says here, which means reform through labour, and referred to the use of prison labour in the People's Republic of China. The Laogai were a series of camps where opponents of the Chinese Communist Party were sent to work as slave labour. So it's a very reasonably subtle, because it's not directly borrowing the word, but a reference to that situation, which is quite tragic and horrible. But what's happening in the show is quite tragic and horrible, so it kind of fits. The two questions that Uncle Iroh asks Zuko to ask himself are, who are you and what do you want? These are prominent philosophical questions from the science fiction series Babylon 5, designed to represent order and chaos, respectively. I don't think that's a reference, personally. I think that's just, who are you, what do you want, is quite a general thing to ask somebody to ask of themselves. But it is nice that it sort of correlates with similar ideas from another show. But I don't think it's actually a direct reference. The other thing that's interesting, Now, I'm not going to go into all the details here because there's a bunch of it. There's so much. But basically, this episode is X-Men 2. Like, in terms of plot. There's a government conspiracy. There's a leader secretly controlling that, the government. And both of the sort of the previous good guys and bad guys in Charles Xavier's X-Men and the Magneto's, whatever you want to call them, gang of reprobates, all have to team up basically to take down the wider issue. So that's Jet's old gang, who had been previously adversarial with Aang's gang, sort of have to team up with the greater threat of the Dai Li. And it all ends in a big fight under a lake where brainwashing is happening. Apparently that's all in X-Men 2. I don't remember X-Men 2. My only memory of X-Men 2 is the opening sequence when Nightcrawler attacks the White House.
Yeah, I remember X-Men 2 being a bit clustered, and I don't remember anything else, but it is heralded as one of the best superhero films of all time. And every time someone mentions X2, I go, I really should rewatch that at some point.
Yeah, I feel like I should too, because it's been so long, I barely remember it.
To be honest with you, it's the same with this is all very personal and subjective, but the way I watched Spider-Man 2 was some dodgy bootleg copy a mate had got while his younger brother talked throughout. And so I think that's the only, I don't think I've ever really sat down and rewatched it. So equally, whenever anyone talks about Spider-Man 2 being this classic, in my head it isn't. And I go, I should really rewatch that so I'm judging the film not the circumstances in which I watched the film.
I remember not feeling like everyone else did about X2. Just feel like it was a bit muddled and fine, nothing wrong with it, some good scenes, but Spider-Man 2 is one of the best superhero movies ever made. And I saw that. I was very lucky. I got to see that in the cinema, really ideal circumstances, and had a great time. You should definitely rewatch it. It holds up too. I remember a couple of years ago I rewatched the Rami trilogy, and the first two are really solid, really, really good, and still hold up. Anyway, so there's so much more about how this movie mimics X-Men 2. I think it's just a coincidence, but it is mad. It's under a lake, it's people being brainwashed. Two of the characters escape, like the way Iroh and Zuko do. A character dies. There's a lot. So that's the trivia. There wasn't much beyond that. Shall we move on to our listener question, Chris?
Yeah, man, I'm pumped.
Listener question this week comes from Carl. Before I get to it very quickly, if you'd like to leave a question for us, you can do so by becoming a patron. Carl is one of our patrons. For as little as $1 a month, you can get episodes of Analysing Avatar and Rewind Reviews 1 week ahead of their YouTube and Spotify and iTunes releases. And you can also ask us questions, which we'll answer at the end of various episodes of Analysing Avatar and Rewind Reviews. So Carl asks, based on what you've learned about personalities and how they connect to one's element, what element do you two think you would have? So in the world of Avatar, seeing how each element has been, firebending seems to come from a place of anger and rage, and the very opposite end of that spectrum, sort of airbending seems to come from sort of a certain amount of peace and tranquility, and monk sort of desire to not fight but to defend, but to dodge, to not to be as direct. Earthbending is obviously the very on the other end of that spectrum, where it's all about being headstrong and forward facing and sort of waterbending is probably the vaguest at the moment in terms of what the personality that goes along with it is. It's somewhat spiritual, but not as spiritual as the monks. It's somewhat headstrong, but not as headstrong as the. It's kind of in the middle of the Venn diagram of air and earth. So I don't know. I reckon. Unfortunately, I'm a dirty old earthbender. I'm rattling around in the mud, getting angry, just saying what I think, being too headstrong. I relate to Toph too much for me to not think that I would be earthbending if I was bending.
Yeah, you're. I don't know for me, but for you, it came instantly. In my head, I went, well, Dan's earthbending.
Yeah, it's true, yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think you're not particularly angry, because if you were angry, you'd be firebending. But you are headstrong and stubborn when you want to be,
Right.
or when you think you're right. So I think you're
Tragically
I think you're
so.
definitely earthbending.
Yeah. I would love to say
And I don't mean to
love...
imply you're. I don't mean to imply you're often wrong, by the way, when I say when you think you're right, but you know what I mean.
But like,
when you
yeah,
know you're right, perhaps.
yeah. If I got angry more often, maybe you could put me towards firebending. But like, yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's tricky. Because you're not as stubborn as that, but you're also not as.
No, I'm not as tranquil either. I'm definitely not airbending.
But you're not an angry person, so I guess that leaves you with water.
Yeah, I think out of the sort of kind of spiritual, but not as much as airbending, and kind of headstrong, but not as much as earthbending. I think it would have to be waterbending. I do have flashes, especially in a working scenario, where if I get angry, I do Jess is probably the only one that sees it, but I can definitely. I do when I want to have a temper, but I don't think it's consistent enough to be fire.
He throws a little strop.
I do, yeah, as you've seen. Yeah, you've seen flashes of it as well. Like, yeah,
I made that sound much worse than it is. It's just it is funny to watch because you know what it is your body isn't used to you being angry, so it always ends up coming across funny instead, because it's so unlike you. When it does happen in those rare moments, it ends up accidentally becoming comical because you're just. Not an aggressive person. Your body sort of almost rejects it, so it ends up just coming across slightly awkward.
There's a lot of it was described once by someone at a place where I used to work, as she said something. She just went, "Stop behaving like a petulant child." And it's so funny because when someone calls you a petulant child, your instinctive reaction is to react like a petulant child. But it is a good description of it. There's a lot of, imagine a child getting angry, and imagine the feet stomping and the clenched fists and and that is me. That is how I behave. But I equally don't think it's not a controlled malicious anger that you'd perhaps get with firebending. It's more in line with earthbending. So I think you're right. I think I'd have to say waterbending.
There you
or
go.
Maybe I'm an avatar baby. All four. I'm not. Yeah, I think Dan's earth, and that's an easier answer, and I'm waterbending, which is a bit looser as an answer.
Yeah,
I am also. I think if you were, I think probably, and it's not an exact thing, but that's the problem though, because he's not technically. What I was going to say is, I think if you took the gang, and you said who are you most like, I'd say you're right. You associate too much with Toph. And I'd go, well, I'm soccer, but soccer isn't anything.
No, but he is water tribe.
He is water tribe. Yeah.
So I think that's what I think water makes a lot of sense for you. So there you go. If we were in the world of Avatar and happened to be benders, I feel like I would be Earth Kingdom.
It is soccer, because soccer's also very. I'm incredibly process driven. I'm incredibly I do a lot of planning. And yeah, I think I am closest to soccer, and he is water tribe. So yeah, we'd do that.
Yeah, there you go. So that's a great question, by the way, Carl. Thumbs up. Question. I really, really enjoyed that one. It's not to disparage any previous questions, obviously, but that one. When I saw it, I was like, that's a good one. You know what I mean?
Great question.
I thought that'll be an interesting answer, regardless. Perfect. So, that is everything for this week. We'll do all the usual links and stuff. You can get us if you do want to go to the Patreon and ask a question like Carl did. High bar set now. Follow that. You're welcome to do so. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. If you'd like to support us in ways where you don't give us your hard-earned cash, we understand. There are other ways you can do that. I mean, we said last week, one of them is just listen. We appreciate you doing that. But if you want to be more engaged, you can, interact with us or interact with the podcast on the various platforms we're on. So, give us a review on iTunes or like give us a thumbs up on whatever whatever platform you use. It probably has some sort of review or rating system to tell that platform you enjoy it. On YouTube, the other option, and you can go and subscribe over on the YouTube channel. That helps. And liking any of the videos of the episodes is also helpful. It puts it in other people's feeds. The more sort of interaction and likes and comments we get, the more the YouTube algorithm TM, decides to go, this must be good content, we'll suggest this to others. So you can help us out by just popping over on YouTube and supporting the channel by liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. Other ways you can support, obviously you can go support Raphodraws. Does amazing artwork. There's some really great stuff. You can get Rapho on Instagram.com/Raphodraws or launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, where there's like a link to like the Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube channel, and I think a Redbubble account where you can like get various items of sort of paraphernalia, paraphernalia, that's the wrong word, I think. You know what I mean? Mugs and posters and stickers and I think phone cases and stuff with artwork from Rapho, including the piece of art that is the sort of key art for this podcast, which is Appa in front of the sort of the sun. There's a flipped version of that where it's Appa in moonlight. It's the same image but like with the colors reversed, and that's also really cool. So yeah, go support Rapho in any way you can. Very kindly permitted us to use that art for our podcast. I also think as well, like there's like I've just had a flick through it. Like there's also some cool My Hero Academia art in there, so it's not all Avatar stuff. In fact, the My Hero Academia art is actually really, really good. Very cool. Nice. Yeah. So there you go. So yeah, go support Rapho, and maybe send Rapho a little tweet and be like, nothing but Static sent me. Analysing Avatar.
Nothing but Static brought me here. What is that term when you like people put that on a YouTube video, don't they? Like they're like, so and so sent me here.
Yeah, it's always awkward when someone does that. It's always like because it's the equivalent of the Twitch raid, but on YouTube, where like someone will say something and they'll say send me here. So like they'll reference a YouTube video on a TV show, and then if you go to that YouTube video, all the comments are this TV show sent me here, this TV show sent me here. Yeah. Anyway, so
do that. Spam Raphodraws with that.
Don't do that. But yeah, no, we are very grateful to Rapho over here on the podcast. It's done an amazing piece of art and has allowed us to use it as like the key art, and it that matters, man. Like it's a big deal. Like when you search Avatar on the iTunes podcast store or Spotify in the podcast section, there's a lot of Avatar podcasts, right? Like there are, and having a good piece of art really helps. Like our podcast stands out when you flick through them, as a result of having such a really awesome drawing attached. So again, infinite thanks to Rapho. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. Obviously, we're back in a week's time. We did mention this in the last one, but for anyone not paying attention, when the series does end, as we approach the last episodes of this series, it's worth noting that when the series does finish, we're going to take a break. I'll give people plenty of warning this time, because we had a few people on the last episode of the last one going like, no, 10 weeks? We'll be switching to Rewind reviews for a couple of weeks, so there'll be a period of time when there won't be new episodes of this for, I don't know, a couple of months, and then we'll come back for season 3. Just to give you guys as much warning as possible that is the plan. Thanks very much everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And come back next week when we sit down to discuss The Earth King.